You're listening to NorthWoods Church Matters, a podcast of NorthWoods Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. Hey, well, welcome back to the NorthWoods Church Matters podcast. I've got our missions pastor, Mr. Ryan Moore, here with us today, and we're going to talk Cuba. I think the introduction to this is, we had kind of a humorous event in church the other day that you were gone in Cuba, and I said that you were in Puerto Rico, and you were not in Puerto Rico, you were in Cuba. Yeah. And the number of people that came up to me is like, you're wrong, he's in Cuba. I was like, why would he be in Cuba? But
that doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make sense, but you really were in Cuba.
I really was in Cuba. So you weren't the only one, right?
Really?
And so I heard that you said Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Others asked me about Costa Rica. I heard Honduras.
Yeah.
And so let's just set the record straight. I was in Cuba.
You were in Cuba.
I was in Cuba. And I'm out of Cuba, which is also a good thing. I did not get stuck in Cuba.
Which you can get in and out of Cuba
really easy.
Pretty easy.
Surprisingly easy, right? I mean, it really shocked me how easy it was to get in and out. But yep, Cuba.
Awesome. So how did Cuba come up on NorthWoods' radar?
We really weren't looking for working with Cuba. We have a member in the church who is involved in teaching a material called Farming God's Way. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, about what that material is, but he has invited NorthWoods to come and see it being implemented, see it being taught, because really we didn't know what it was or if it was going to be a good fit for NorthWoods.
Mm-hmm.
He is involved with a different nonprofit within the state of Indiana that was taking a trip to Cuba, and airline tickets to Cuba are not that expensive,
really?
Right? Yeah, they're really not that, well, I say not that expensive. Everything is relative, right? But not compared to going to like Africa or something like that, right? Cuba is pretty close. And so it was a relatively inexpensive way for us to see if this Farming God's Way was going to be a good fit for NorthWoods and if we could utilize it in our own mission endeavors in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how Cuba came up on our radar.
So I've heard this before. Is Cuba like stepping back in time, cars from the 50s and things like that?
It really is. It really is. And so you land in an airport in which the airport was nice. Again, everything is everything is relative. It's nice in that there was air conditioning in the building and there was some amenities, some restaurants and stuff inside of there. But when you go outside of that, so the airport we flew into was in Havana. And so Havana is obviously going to be built up and a little nicer than other areas of the country. But you go outside and you're immediately, all you see all around you is these old cars from the 50s outside. And so there's a few newer vehicles that are there, but by far and large, I mean, it is really just... My dad would have loved it. Loved it. My dad loved old classic cars, and everybody in Cuba seems to know how to fix things because they're a very industrious people. They have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so if something breaks down, they have to be able to tinker on it and work on it and get it working themselves. But
not a throwaway society.
Not a throwaway society like here in America. But that was a neat aspect of it. I got some really cool pictures of that. My dad would have loved it.
That's awesome. So what does it look like for most people that live in Cuba?
There's a great deal of poverty in Cuba. It was told to me when I was there that the average Cuban lives on the equivalent of $20 a month, US dollars a month. That's just mind-boggling for us, right? We go to a restaurant, right? If it's a nicer sit-down restaurant, a lot of our meals will cost $20.
Yeah.
And it was very eye-opening in that regard. I've been to other impoverished countries before, particularly in Africa, but Cuba, for it to be so close to us, it's remarkably different. Mm-hmm. And so poverty is a very real thing there in Cuba. I told you earlier, a lot of people are very industrious. They fix things. They're not a throwaway society. If something breaks down, they will fix it. There is a significant amount of agriculture that is in Cuba, right? That is just a way that people support themselves and provide for their families and grow food for them to eat, grow food to sell, that kind of a thing. I've been asked Did I ever feel like I was in danger while I was in Cuba? Did you see police carrying around rifles or anything like that? No, I didn't. I felt very safe, and part of that was probably because the pastors and the folks that we were working with were just taking care of us, right? They were wise, they were smart, and they were protecting us. But really, even on the main road when we were driving along, I mean, there was never a situation that I felt like I'm in danger right now. This is a scary situation.
What is the government's relationship with Christianity? I know that in other communist countries, you hear about communist Russia or communist China, there's hostility with Christianity. Is there a hostility with Christianity in Cuba?
I didn't observe it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that doesn't exist because I was only there for 10 days, but I did not observe that happening. My wife sent me a picture that she saw on Instagram before I left. Actually, I was in the airport when I left, and she is connected to the Voice of the Martyrs on Instagram. And that morning, they had posted a picture of a church that was worshiping, and hours before that picture was taken, local authorities had come in and sledgehammered the walls down and knocked the walls down and all of that. And the Voice of the Martyrs was saying, pray for these people. They're continuing to worship even in the midst of persecution. I'm sure that happens, right? I'm sure that kind of thing happens. I didn't observe it. And I even asked somebody else about that when I was there. I said, do y'all see this kind of thing happening? And he wasn't aware of anything like that happening in the recent past, right? Years ago, it would have been very common. But right now, it seems to me that the government allows for things to happen, for the churches to meet, as long as they're not causing issues, they're not causing disturbances within those communities, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, one of the weird connections that we have with Cuba was that on multiple trips that we've taken to Ecuador, there was a pastor that we've worked with, and he's a Cuban pastor who planted a church in Ecuador.
How cool is that?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. So,
wow.
I mean, there's enough thriving of Christianity in Cuba that they actually were sending out church planters from Cuba to other places.
Yeah.
And so
it
was a weird little connection there.
Yeah, the Lord is moving.
What can you tell us about the program that you've mentioned, Farming God's Way?
So I was able to sit through a couple of sessions of it being taught. It's something that's able to be taught over a 2 to 3 day period. And so it does require a little bit of longevity. It can't be done in one day. It's designed to go into impoverished countries, impoverished areas, teach farming skills that's different than what you see commonly practiced in most of the world today. And so they teach these farming skills along with key biblical concepts and key biblical principles. And so there's, like, the very first biblical concept that they teach is that you acknowledge God in everything, right? That God is sovereign, that He is creator. And not only is He creator, but He is sustainer of all things. We look to Him for our livelihood. We look to Him spiritually for our salvation as well. And that's what the leadership at NorthWoods was most concerned with when we found out about Farming God's Way, and was this going to be a fit? Theologically, was this going to work with us? And I didn't see anything that I thought, that's heresy or red flags or anything like that. And so they really just teach these farming skills, these technical skills to folks that can then go and put them to practice in these countries where poverty is just rampant. And there's biblical principles that go along with it. Worship is a part of it, right? I mean, before each session, there was worship and times of prayer, and we were able to have gospel conversations with people. There were some folks that came to faith in Christ through this. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's a good tool for the church to use.
Yeah, and it kind of fits into a weird debate that happens in missions, is that often there's this odd debate about, should we meet people's physical needs or should we meet their spiritual needs?
Yeah.
And really the answer is yes.
Yes, that's
both.
right. Yes.
I mean, we can do both at the same time.
That's right.
And it sounds like what this program is all about.
That's what this program's all about. And the folks that I went with, another way that they like to meet physical needs is when they go down, because they've made multiple trips, they'll carry these little water filters with them, right? Because clean water is something that they struggle with, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're coming in and they're teaching these skills, and they're also teaching these biblical concepts and teaching, acknowledge God in everything, but they're saying at the same time, we love you and we care for you and the Lord loves you. Here's a gift from us to you. And so it's really not an either or situation. It's a both and that we should be doing.
Yeah, good. So what was your favorite meal in Cuba?
I didn't eat anything that was bad. Mm-hmm. And I have been on mission trips before where I did not enjoy some things that I ate.
Yeah.
This was not one of them. Most of the meals looked like a combination of rice and beans. And so it would work within the Dave Ramsey budget lifestyle, right? Rice and beans and rice. They grow a lot of stuff. And so most of the time we had tomatoes and cucumbers. And every now and then there was a meat that was present as well. Beef is really hard to come by in Cuba. There is a more severe punishment for somebody killing a cow than somebody killing a person in Cuba. And so beef is it's highly regulated by the government. It's not readily available for all people. And so I don't know that we had beef. They didn't always tell us what the meat was, and I don't recall having beef. I heard a joke said that if you are having beef, what they call it, there's a code name for it. They call it the tilapia of the barn, is what they call it.
Fish of the barn.
The fish of the barn. Fish of the barn. But I mean, I really didn't have a bad meal. They were very hospitable, took care of us. Coffee is a big thing over there, and so after most meals, you have a little cup of coffee to go along with it, and they make their coffee with sugar, and so if you like bitter coffee, then you're going to struggle a little bit unless you just ask for it, because they make it and they put just as automatic, at least the people that I was with, they put sugar in it, which I like.
Sounds like my type of people.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not a real man. I like creamer and sugar.
So what was most encouraging about your trip to Cuba?
Something that I've read and heard about before going, because I did a little bit of research beforehand, was that church planting is exploding in Cuba. I didn't know that if I was going to be able to observe that or see that firsthand, but I was eager to. I hoped that I would. One of the guys that we were connected with, that we stayed in his home, and he helped us by providing transportation, and he helped teach some of the material for Farming God's Way. He is a Baptist pastor, and so we were able to connect through that. But also, he has a desire to plant churches through his church. And so the story that I got is that a couple of years ago, they were not able to meet in their building. I don't know if that was due to COVID or if that was due to maybe some deterioration of the building or what, but they weren't able to meet in their building. And so he sent his congregation of 60 or 70 out into their communities where they were and said, do Bible studies in your homes and also invite your neighbors to them. And lo and behold, it exploded on him.
Wow.
And through his church and through those house churches that were kind of planted through that, in the past couple of years, they've planted something like 43 churches.
Wow.
Over there.
That's amazing.
Which is really is just astonishing, right? I was able to see that. I was able to have some conversation with that. I've continued having conversations with him even since I've been home. One of the things that we are asking ourselves here at NorthWoods, I know I am, is what does a partnership look like here? If we wanted to do something with Cuba in the future, what does that look like? And really a partnership in the truest sense, right? That it's not only us looking at how can we help them and be of benefit to them, but they're obviously doing something, right? If they've planted 43 churches in the past couple of years, right? I mean, I'm for sure there's going to be things that we can learn from them as well. And so I was super encouraged at seeing how the Lord is doing that in church planting in Cuba. And that's not an uncommon thing to hear, that in these closed countries where there is real persecution, that the Lord really does work in miraculous ways, and his church just grows. His church expands. His church multiplies. I was grateful I was able to see that. I was also encouraged at just the hospitality that they showed to us, the kindness they showed to us. They don't have a lot, but they were generous with what they had.
Yeah, I'm always reminded going overseas how inhospitable Americans actually are.
Oh, man.
It's really sad to see people with much less that give so much more and allow people into their homes. I mean, it's just amazing.
I've thought about this in the past, and I've come to realize it in the past, but I was reminded of it, is just how much comfort is an idol. To me, right? I don't know if other people that are going to be listening to this struggle with that as well, but comfort can become a god in our life to where we say, I'm not going to do anything that makes me uncomfortable, because they live a different lifestyle than us. And the comforts and the luxuries that we have in America, 99% of the people over there don't have. And I was just reminded of just how much I crave comfort, and that's not necessarily a good thing in my own life.
One of the things we've noticed in Ecuador was just about the pace of life is so much slower.
Yeah.
And that's a healthy thing. Do you feel like it's slower in Cuba too?
Yeah. I'm sure that's a Latin thing, right? A Latin culture thing. We noticed that as well. Like, we would set a time to start. It would never happen on time, right? It's a good goal. It never happened. And so that's one of the things about being on a mission trip is that you just have to go with the flow a lot of times and be willing to be flexible and adapt and change and adjust and pivot. I mean, all of that is key to going on mission. But yeah. Starting on time is not necessary.
No. Dave Wilson used to say about Ecuador that if you tell somebody that the meeting's going to start at 7 in Ecuador, then as long as the first number is still 7, they're on time.
You have 59 minutes.
Yeah, 59 minutes to still get there. It's 7-ish.
Yeah, that's right. And they go longer, right? So their day may start a little later, but they're fine with starting a church activity at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night as well. We were a part of some of that was going on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how can we as NorthWoods pray for Cuba?
A couple of ways that we can pray is that what God is doing in the way of church planting there, that he would continue to do, that he would continue to make himself known to people that don't know him, that his church would continue to expand and to grow there in that country. But also pray for NorthWoods as we're trying to discern, what does this look like for us? Is this a way for us to get involved in what the Lord is doing over there? How can we help? What would an appropriate way for NorthWoods to help Cuba? What would that look like? And so those two things, there's real poverty there, right? I know that they would appreciate our prayers and that God would just continue to meet their needs, right?
Yeah.
That he's in control of all things. He is the sustainer, that he would continue to meet the needs of families there in Cuba.
Yeah. Here's the $1 million question. Did you bring back any Cuban cigars?
So I did not, which for some people that are listening to this, they may say, that's the right answer right there. That's the right answer. I will say,
I would be disappointed if you didn't at least investigate.
I did investigate.
Yeah.
I heard that it was illegal to buy them on the street and try to smuggle them back in. And I wanted to create as few barriers to my entry back home as possible.
Right.
And so I did not buy any on the street. But when I got to the airport, they do sell them. It's legal to buy them in the airport. And I went into a store because I was thinking, if these things are cheap enough, I may buy a couple. Not that I smoke them, but it's cool to have a Cuban cigar. And I probably know somebody that would appreciate having one. Investigated how much they were. A 5-pack in the airport, which airport prices are pretty crazy and inflated on everything anyway. But a 5-pack was $250 US. $250.
Yeah, no thank you.
No thank you. I will pass.
I'd rather make a car payment.
That's exactly right. Yeah. This will take care of one Walmart run for my family.
Right, exactly.
Right? This will feed us for a while. So I passed it up. I didn't buy them, which I talked to a guy that has bought them in the past from there. And he said, that's pretty inflated from what it has been in the past.
Anything else you'd like to share about missions going on at NorthWoods?
Yeah, lots of things. We do have some mission trips that are on the calendar right now. We have an Ecuador trip. We have an Ireland trip. We have a Puerto Rico trip. There's more that's in process that are going to be materializing soon. And so if you have interest in that, they're in the bulletin and they're in the Connect card. So go ahead and sign up on those so that we can know who's coming, how many to expect to come. One of the things that we do at NorthWoods is we want to prepare them well to be ready for that. And so there's a lot that has to go on before we go off on these trips. And so the sooner that you can sign up for these, the better for us.
And now's the time to start vacation planning or
That's right.
Summer planning.
That's it.
So it's time to get on board.
Time to get on board.
Good deal. Well, thanks, Ryan, for stopping in. And I'm sure we'll have you back to talk about more things that are going on.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the NorthWoods Church Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about NorthWoods Church, you can visit us at our website, www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org.